You think a nightclub makes money selling drinks, loud music, flashing lights. A few hundred people packed onto a dance floor, throwing back overpriced cocktails until 3 a.m. Simple business, right? Buy alcohol cheap, sell it expensive, repeat every weekend. Here's the number that should stop you before this video even gets going. A bottle of vodka that costs the club owner around $25 to $30 wholesale gets sold at the table for $500 to $700. That's not a markup. That's a 20 times multiplier on a single bottle of liquor. By every normal rule of business, that math should make nightclub owners some of the richest people in hospitality. Instead, industry data puts nightclubs among the most likely hospitality businesses to shut their doors within the first few years of opening. So, how does a business selling a $25 bottle for $600 still manage to fail more often than it succeeds? Who's actually pocketing that 20 times markup if it isn't the owner? And why right now is an entire generation quietly walking away from the dance floor altogether? Let's take it apart. Picture the assumption almost anyone makes standing in line outside a club at midnight. Big crowd, big cover charge, big drink prices. This has to be one of the most profitable rooms in the entire hospitality industry. Our spirits carry some of the highest markups of any product sold to consumers anywhere, often 200% to 500% over wholesale cost. Nightclubs push that further than almost anyone else selling alcohol. Here's the crack in that story. Despite margins that would make a jewelry store jealous, a huge share of nightclubs that open don't survive past their first couple of years. Some industry estimates put the failure rate north of 60% within the first year alone. A business with margins this obscene should not be dying this fast. Something between the bottle and the bank account is quietly draining the profit before the owner ever sees it. Here's the assumption that gets almost every new nightclub owner: sell more bottles, sell more cover charges, pack the room tighter, and the profits scale right along with it. More bodies, more bottles, more money. Simple retail math applied to a party. Destroy that assumption with one number. Rent and lease costs for a prime nightlife location in a major city can run tens of thousands of dollars a month before a single drink is poured. And unlike a restaurant, a nightclub can only realistically generate serious revenue 2, maybe 3 nights a week. Think about what that means. You're paying rent for 7 days. You're only allowed to make real money on 2 or 3 of them. Every Monday through Wednesday, the lights, the lease, the staff on payroll, all of it is bleeding cash against a room that's making almost nothing. The 20x markup on the bottle was never the whole equation. The clock the business is racing against is layer in the parts of the business that never show up in the 20x markup headline. Security staff for every open night, regardless of how many people actually show up. Liability insurance running higher than almost any other hospitality category, because a room full of alcohol, strangers, and darkness carries a risk profile bars and restaurants simply don't have. A liquor license that can cost anywhere from a few $1,000s to well over 6 figures depending on the city before a single bottle is ever sold. None of that cares whether Tuesday night draws 12 people or 200. The obvious next theory, fine. It's not the weekday dead nights killing owners. It's just intense competition for that Friday-Saturday revenue. Whoever throws the best party, books the best DJ, wins the weekend, so owners chase it. Book a headline DJ for $20,000, $50,000, sometimes 6 figures for one night. Buy an Instagram-worthy sparkler moment for every bottle delivered to a table, because a viral clip of a $700 bottle arriving with fireworks sells the next table before the first one's even opened. Destroy that theory too. Talk to operators who've actually run these rooms, and a different pattern emerges. The clubs that spend the most chasing that headline DJ viral moment arms race are often the same ones that close first. Chasing the biggest weekend spectacle burns cash faster than it reliably brings it back. So if out partying the competition isn't the winning formula, and the bottle markup alone can't cover a mostly empty building 5 nights a week, what's actually keeping the survivors alive? Look past the dance floor, into the roped-off section along the wall. That's where the real business of a nightclub happens, and it isn't really about the bottle at all. It's about the table. A single VIP table with a minimum spend can generate more revenue in one night than the entire general admission crowd combined. One group of 8, agreeing to a $2,000 or $3,000 table minimum for the night, can outspend 100 people paying $20 at the door and nursing one drink each for 4 hours. Here's the mechanism nobody tells you standing in line. That table doesn't get filled by the club's marketing team. It gets filled by promoters, independent operators who bring in groups of paying customers, night after night, in exchange for a commission on what those tables spend. The promoter isn't a club employee in the traditional sense. They're a freelance sales force, competing with promoters from other clubs for the same pool of big spenders, and the club needs them far more than it likes to admit. That flips the entire business model on its head. The nightclub doesn't primarily sell alcohol to strangers walking in off the street. It sells access, a velvet rope, a reserved seat, a bottle with a sparkler, to a small number of high-spending tables. Cultivated by a network of promoters, the club doesn't fully control and has to keep constantly incentivized. The 20x markup on the bottle isn't pure profit. A meaningful slice of it is already spoken for before the bottle even reaches the table, as commission to the person who brought the paying group in the door. Think about the leverage this hands the promoter, not the owner. A promoter with a loyal following of big spenders can walk across the street to a rival club, offering a better commission split, taking their entire book of paying tables with them overnight. The club owns the building, the liquor license, the sound system, everything except the one relationship that actually determines whether Saturday night makes money or loses it. Why does a group of friends agree to spend $2,000 on liquor they could buy at a store for $150? It was never about the vodka. Think about what actually gets delivered to that table. Not just bottles, a procession. Sparklers held aloft above the crowd. A dedicated server weaving through the room specifically for your group. A velvet rope that everyone else in line had to wait behind, and you didn't. You're not buying alcohol. You're buying a temporary, visible upgrade in social status, performed in front of a room full of strangers who will never know your name, but will absolutely watch the sparklers go by. And once that status has been purchased in front of your friends, walking it back becomes almost impossible. Ordering a second, smaller round after the big bottle and sparkler entrance would look like you couldn't afford the first one. The psychology of the room pushes spending up, not down, the longer the night goes on. Layer scarcity on top. Tables near the DJ booth are limited. Weekend nights sell out weeks in advance for anyone hoping to book the best real estate in the room. The velvet rope isn't security theater. It's the mechanism manufacturing the exact anxiety that makes overpaying for a bottle feel, in the moment, like the only option. Every business that's dependent on a specific kind of customer eventually runs into a demographic wall. Here's this one's dot. Nearly 2 in 3 Gen Z adults say they plan to drink less, and a meaningful share are going fully dry, not just for a month, but as an ongoing lifestyle. The generation nightclubs have always depended on to fill the next decade of Friday nights is the same generation actively walking away from alcohol as a social currency altogether. The consequences aren't theoretical. In the UK, roughly 400 nightclubs shut permanently in under 4 years, and one of the country's largest club chains closed 17 venues in a single wave, citing the exact combination of rising costs and falling turnout from younger drinkers. Industry veterans describe walking through city centers on a Friday night and seeing a fraction of the crowds that used to show up 2 years earlier. Here's the deepest cut. This isn't a business cycle. Surveys show the shift away from heavy drinking among young adults started over 2 decades ago and has only accelerated, driven by health awareness, cost of living pressure, and a social media culture where being visibly sober is now something people post about with pride, not something to hide. The threat was never a bad DJ booking or a rival club opening across the street. It's an entire generation quietly redefining what a great night out even looks like, and increasingly deciding it doesn't require a $600 bottle at all. And it isn't only Gen Z's choice driving the shift. Cost of living plays an equally brutal role. A generation with less disposable income than their parents had at the same age is weighing a $2,000 table minimum against rent, student debt, and grocery prices. And the table is losing that comparison more often than nightclub owners would like to admit. So what happens to the model built entirely on selling status through alcohol, aimed at a generation drinking less of it? It's already splitting into 2 very different futures. One path, soft clubbing, earlier events, Daytime dance parties, sober, curious raves built around movement and music instead of intoxication. Growing fast enough that event platforms are tracking it as a defined category rather than a fringe trend. Venues willing to rebuild their entire revenue model around cover charges, food, and premium non-alcoholic drink programs are finding a new audience that traditional clubs never reached. The other path, consolidation at the very top of the market. The biggest, most expensive, most spectacle-driven venues in cities like Las Vegas and Miami keep thriving precisely because they've turned the experience into something closer to theater than a bar. A night out sold as a once-a-year splurge, not a weekly habit. Those venues can charge more per table specifically because they're competing for the shrinking pool of people still willing to pay for the old version of the night out. What's disappearing is the middle. The mid-tier club, dependent on steady weekly foot traffic and modest bottle sales, is caught between a generation that doesn't want what it's selling and a luxury tier it can't afford to become. That squeeze is showing up in the numbers already. Cities that once supported a dozen mid-tier clubs within walking distance of each other are down to a handful, while the flagship venues at the very top keep expanding, opening second and third locations in other markets. The middle isn't declining slowly. It's being hollowed out from both directions at once. Picture two clubs opening on the same street, same year, same city. Path 1, the traditional operator. Leases a mid-size room, books a resident DJ, relies on general cover charges and modest bottle sales spread across a broad crowd. Margins on the alcohol itself look incredible on paper, 60% to 85% gross. But rent bleeds 5 nights a week, promoter commissions eat into the 2 nights that actually make money, and one slow month during a cost of living squeeze is enough to threaten the whole operation. This is the model most likely to appear in that 60% plus first-year failure statistic. Path 2, the promoter and spectacle operator. Builds the business explicitly around VIP tables from day one. A dedicated promoter network, a sparkler and presentation program treated as core infrastructure rather than an afterthought, pricing that flexes upward on marquee nights and major events. Revenue concentrates hard into a handful of nights a year, but each of those nights can outperform a month of a traditional room. Higher volatility, but a business model actually built around how nightlife spending really works in 2026, not how it worked in 1995. Same dance floor. Same 20 times markup on the bottle. One owner is still betting on a crowd that's shrinking. The other rebuilt the entire business around the smaller, higher-spending crowd that's still showing up. So go back to that line outside the club at midnight. That $600 bottle arriving with sparklers held high above the crowd. It was never really about the alcohol. It's a business that figured out how to package status, scarcity, and spectacle into a liquid you could theoretically buy at any liquor store for a fraction of the price, and then built an entire ecosystem of promoters, velvet ropes and viral entrances around convincing people that theirs was worth 20 times more. The bottle is the receipt. The status is the product, and the generation that grew up watching that spectacle happen on a phone screen instead of living inside it is now quietly deciding they'd rather keep their money or spend it on something that doesn't require a hangover to remember. The clubs that survive what comes next won't be the ones with the loudest speakers or the most expensive DJ booking. They'll be the ones that figure out what people are actually willing to pay for. Once the alcohol stops being the reason they showed up. Because the room, the lights, the rope, the sparkler, none of that was ever really selling a drink. It was selling a feeling. And feelings, unlike bottles, don't require a hangover, a $600 price tag, or a generation that's still willing to pay for the version of the night out that used to work.